is called the Ghost Dance Judgement. It is the fourth book in the Golgotha series. It will be coming out from Falstaff Books June the 2nd, or earlier if you make it down to Con Carolinas. All right, I'm going to read as much of this as I have time to read, because I don't want to be late for the other panel, so I'm going to probably wrap at like 5 till. So, all right, here we go. Yeah, the other panel, by the way, is horror and sex. It's kind of autobiographical. So if you'd like to come to that, we can chat some more.
You were at my house the other day. Melissa's Jason on that panel?
Probably.
Prologue, The Ace of Wands, August 23rd, 2019. Will took the access road off of I-95 toward the town that didn't exist. A small sign posted beside the dirt road out into the desert said simply enough, "State maintenance ends here." It got
desert in Southwest Virginia?
Oh no, this is not no. Well, other book. It got bumpy past the sign. His SUV bucked and dipped as he lost sight of the highway, the only sign of progress of civilization out here. He drove for a little less than an hour. Drove for a little less than an hour, following the dirt road the desert had done its damnedest to devour. A few times he thought he was lost and had to get out, get his bearings, and backtrack. GPS was useless out here. Every time he tried to feed the coordinates into his phone, the app came back with a crazed voice that was not the calm, automated female tone he was used to. It was the normal voice, but in a frenzied spitting and it was the normal voice, but in a frenzy, spitting and uttering words in some guttural language that made the reptile part of his brain twist and squirm, made his ears itch from the inside, like ants were crawling into his skull. After several tries and a notification from his phone that he had no service, and that his immortal soul was damned if he continued on, Will turned the phone off. A cut of a smile crossed his face. At least he knew he was headed in the right direction. The road widened and the hills flattened out, and he saw the town. He slowed as he passed long neglected fields and the collapsing shell of a farmhouse. This place was southeast of the Humboldt River. It had probably gotten its irrigation from underground tributaries. The road was still unpaved, but it was clear. On either side of it, he could see old, crumbling buildings, like the ribs of a starvation victim jutting out. At the edge of the town, there was a line of high chain-link fence that had once encircled the town. It was crowned with tangles of rusty barbed wire. The fence was in disrepair, rusted and falling in on itself. The gate that had once barred entrance to the town was long gone. Mounted on a section of the fence was a sun-faded sign that said, "Warning! It is unlawful to enter this area without the permission of the United States government. Use of deadly force is authorized." Just beyond the fence and the ominous warning on the other side was a large rectangular sign that he suspected had seen its best days back in the 1920s. It said simply, "Welcome to Golgotha, Nevada, an oasis in the desert." He drove past the fence. Golgotha welcomed him like a lonely spinster eager for company. The buildings along what may have been Main Street were a mishmash of simple clapboard shacks and businesses, many with sagging, dangerous-looking covered porches. They looked like they were probably a century and a half old. Other structures looked like they had been built later, probably in the 20s. To his right, there was a fenced-in drive-in theater, its massive screen's canvas peeling off and hanging limply to the frame beneath it. Islands of gravel held rows of speaker posts that reminded him of tombstones in a graveyard. The marquee, which looked like it had been very stylish in the space-age 50s, announced that the Mephisto Drive-In Theater was proud to present a double feature, It, the Terror from Beyond Space, and The Thing That Couldn't Die. Many of the red plastic letters had fallen off the sign. He drove past a partially collapsed building that announced it had been Schultz's General Store and Butcher Shop, and spied ahead on his left a gas station convenience store that looked like it came from the 70s or 80s. There was a placard out front that announced gas prices that were appropriately usurious for a gas station in the middle of a desert wasteland. The neon sign in the window glowed a cherry red and announced the place was open. He pulled up and parked. Out front, there was an old military Jeep and a scooter with an orange plastic milk crate bungee corded onto the rear bumper. Both were covered with a thick coat of desert dust. After the relative cool of the AC, the heat hit him like a baseball bat when he opened the car door. You had to be careful running your AC out here, but he brought spare coolant, plenty of water. Even on low AC, the difference between the car and the outside was stunning and immediate. He wondered how the hell folks in wagons had survived the crossing to California and Utah in this kind of heat. A little brass bell attached to the door tinkled as he opened it. The industrial AC was humming along inside the convenience store, and the claws of the desert's heat were forced to release him and wait outside to pounce on him again. The place looked like it served many purposes for the folks who still lived around here. There were rows of shelves, like a grocery store, with chips, laundry detergent, pet food, car repair products, and snakebite kits. A prominent display of cheap Southwest souvenirs included lots of turquoise and silver jewelry, T-shirts with wolves on a mesa howling at the bright full moon, lighters, string ties, plastic rattlesnake and cattle skulls, and black velvet paintings featuring stoic Native Americans in completely the wrong headdresses and clothes for their tribe ceremonies. There were spinning racks of cheap toys, candy, beef jerky, trail mix. The coolers had every imaginable color, flavor, and type of alcohol. He paused at a wire spinner full of cheap old paperbacks, some 70s-looking porno, pulp westerns, a smattering of audiobooks, and a hodgepodge of lurid titles designed to appeal to the truckers, like The Brotherhood of the Wheel and King of the Road, penned by some obscure author. Afternoon, a voice with a timbre as rich and smoky as good pipe tobacco. What brings you out here? He turned to see a man now behind the counter. He hadn't been there a moment ago. He was tall and slender. His black hair was long and tied back into a ponytail. He had a neatly trimmed short black beard. The man wore a pair of old jeans and a faded Led Zeppelin t-shirt with the band's logo above a faceless angel, back arched, arms raised towards heaven, either in pleading or in defiance. His eyes were darker than the night. Good afternoon, Will replied, slipping his badge off his belt and showing his credentials to the cashier. The cashier looked at him oddly, a look of recognition, and a slight nod as if something suddenly made sense to him. He looked at the badge and the federal ID. Secret Service? We don't get too many of you folk out this way. I'm surprised, he said. This is federal land. I didn't expect to find anyone out here still. Oh, that, the cashier said. Military lost interest in the place back in the 70s. They don't seem to mind us being out here still. No offense, Mr. Bick, the cashier said. Marcus Bick. No offense, Mr. Bick, but why would anyone want to be out here? Everybody's got to be somewhere. My family owned all this land until the government seized it in the 50s. It's my home, has been for a long time. Golgotha tends to grow on you, Mr. Negri, he said. Will Negri. No, I don't understand that. In fact, I guess in a way, me being here in Golgotha is kind of a homecoming. I'm out here on a little bit of a family genealogy project. Do tell, Bick said. I understand a relative of mine, my great-great-grandfather, was a lawman in this town back in the late 1800s. That would be Jim Negri, Bick said. Yes, he was. Rather prominent, too, in his day. You know the town's history? Intimately. Like I said, Agent Negri, my family has been here for a very long time. Bick stepped out from behind the counter. You might say I'm Golgotha's unofficial historian. Here, let me show you a few things that might interest you. Bick led Will further back into the store. They passed a small carpeted room with a tinted glass wall and door. Inside, Will saw a scrawny old woman wearing a dirty shift dress and a faded floral pattern. Her skin was wrinkled and leathery. Her hair was a tangled gray mop. She was playing one of the 3 electronic poker machines in the room. The wall opposite the poker game had 3 slot machines. On one side of the store was a small cafe of sorts with a cluster of chipped and stained formica tables and vacuum-molded plastic chairs of orange and blue. One wall of the cafe had windows looking out on the parking lot, the gas tanks, and the decaying carcass of Main Street. Another wall was covered with framed pictures, all of them antique. Will scanned the photos of Golgotha, streets teeming with people in prosperous, thriving places. He spotted one photo of a group of men posing before a building whose window identified it as the Golgotha Bank and Trust. Will noticed one of the men dressed head to toe in black finery in the picture, and he looked over to Marcus. "One of my relatives," Bick said. "Malachi Bick. He owned a saloon on this very spot back in the 1870s. "You're the spitting image," Will said. Bick smiled. "There's a resemblance," he said. "Speaking of spitting images, I think this is what you're looking for." Bick walked a few feet over and showed Will a photo of a group of people posing in front of an ugly brick block building with a short covered porch, a great iron door, and bars on the windows. Like all photos of the day, the subject had to stand still long enough for the image to be burned onto the photographic plate. So, the subject stood still, their faces remained still. They all wore a lawman's star proudly, prominently. The man at the fore was tall and handsome with a square jaw and a kerchief around his neck. To his right was a shorter man, a Native American, with a weathered face and crooked beak of a nose. A sardonic smile played at the edges of his cruel mouth. To the tall man's left was a woman with brown hair pulled back tightly. She wasn't plain, nor was she beautiful. She had the kind of face that would blend seamlessly into a crowd and slip out of memory. She wore pants and a short bolero jacket. Beside the native man was a tall youngster with a kind, open face and a natural smile. Will recognized the boy's face. He saw a version of it in the mirror each morning. "Sheriff John Highfather," Bick said, "and his deputies. The Welty outcast Mutt, Kate Moore, the first female detective in the United States, and your great-great-grandfather, Jim Negri." When was this taken?" Will asked, leaning closer to the photo, looking intently at his ancestor. "Around 1871, 1872, as I recollect, Bick said. Will glanced at him. "At least that was what I was told," the clerk added. "Sometime shortly before the Ghost Dance War." "War?" Will said. "The Ghost Dance movement began in the 1890s. It was Bick's turn to give a state of incredulity. "Everybody's read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee in school, right? There was an older movement upon which the second Ghost Dance movement you speak of was born out," Bick said, pulling out a plastic chair and gesturing to Will to sit in it. When the federal agent had, Bick joined him. "It started with a Paiute mystic named Thornton Wadziwab, and it began around these parts," Bick began. And was so often the case in those days, Golgotha was smack dab in the middle of it. "You hungry, Mr. Negri?" "Pretty much always," Will said. Bick smiled. "Let me treat you to lunch, and let me tell you a story." And that's the prologue for the fourth Golgotha novel. So, and it is 1 minute before the panel starts. So thank you guys very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope to get a chance to talk to all of you more tonight and tomorrow. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming.